Naturalism and natural theology. The purpose of this presentation is to demonstrate that there exists a philosophical wall which prevents any evidence invoking a non-naturalistic cause for the origin of life from being considered by the scientific community. Scientific method, metaphysical naturalism, methodological naturalism, and scientism. We're going to talk about the definitions of these, and the first is the scientific method. Science is the method of discovering the truth about the world through the process of induction. This follows the process of observation, then hypothesis, followed by experimentation, interpretation, and conclusion, which creates either a theory or a law. The metaphysical naturalism is a view about reality which says that the material world is all that exists. Only the things that can be empirically verified are real, and it denies the existence of a supernatural beyond the physical world. It is the strongest form of atheism. Methodological naturalism is a methodology for doing science that limits valid explanations to meet material processes only. It forbids the experimenting from invoking a non-naturalistic cause. It says, if you want to be scientific, you must infer natural causes. Adopted by the mainstream science, and for the naturalists, this is woven into the very definition of science. Scientism is defined as an epistemological stance which claims that science is the only test for truth. Statements that cannot be empirically verified are meaningless. Empirical verification through the five senses. Scientism is the most extreme form of empiricism. Synonymous terms are logical positivism or verificationism. Natural theology. Natural theology is theology, which is the knowledge of God, derived from the natural revelation. Antithetical to methodological naturalism, and it is natural revelation, God's revelation to us through the natural world, which is science and logic. It is accessible to everyone. Special revelation, different than natural theology, God's revelation to us through the supernatural means, scripture, prophecy, angels, visions, etc. Romans 1:20 says, "For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." We're going to define intelligent design and creationism. Intelligent design is a theory that says the effects of conscious activity, design, can be detected scientifically. Design can be empirically verified. Creationism, the attempt to harmonize the Bible with science, starts with the Bible as a source document, then attempts to find empirical justification. Often the term creationism implies a young earth creationism, and the difference between the two is creationism claims to know the identity of the designer, which is God, while the intelligent design, being a more modest position, does not make any claim. The ID could be aliens, for example. Creationism is inherently religious, while intelligent design is strictly a scientific theory. Explain the difference between the scientific method and methodological naturalism. The scientific method is a methodology for discovering truth about the world, and the methodological naturalism, a philosophical assumption that limits the conclusion one can draw from their observations of the world, and they are not synonyms. The potential problem with naturalism is naturalism, when assumed, arbitrarily reduces the number of possible explanations. For example, the detective is told that he cannot implicate a white man for the crime. We need to look at the evidence before we can rule out that possible explanations. It is a matter of intellectual integrity. An argument to justify naturalism, the first one we'll look at, is beyond the realm of science argument. Science deals with the empirical inquiry, and if God is immaterial, then we cannot empirically verify God's existence, and the God question lies beyond the realm of science. The response number one is, while it is true that God's existence could never be empirically verified because God is immaterial, science can verify premises to the philosophical arguments which lead to the conclusion that God exists. Or another response would be, intelligent design can be empirically verified by testing the theory on the effects of human intelligence. The second argument to justify naturalism is that God of the gaps argument. Traditionally, the supernatural has been used to make sense of unexplainable phenomena, lightning, earthquakes, diseases, mental illnesses, and God has been used to fill in the gaps of our knowledge. Since the dawn of the scientific revolution, those gaps have consistently been filled with naturalistic explanations. We have come to the point where those are the most of the gaps that have been filled. But a few questions remain, such as the origin of the universe, the fine-tuning of the universe, and the information that we find in DNA. To say, God did it, and move on is to be a lazy scientist. Roll up your sleeves and get to work, because the answer is out there. Well, the argument continues by the response. Time hasn't helped the question of our origins, it has made the problem worse. New discoveries about DNA, for example, or the universe and the brain. Another response would be the justification for invoking causes beyond the natural world is not based upon our lack of knowledge. Rather, it's based upon the learning that we have from scientific inquiry, such as intelligent design is a positive argument, not an argument from ignorance. And third, we say, couldn't we make a parallel science of the gaps argument? Given more time, science will prove us with those answers. The lack of evidence for naturalism. There is no positive evidence for naturalism. How could you possibly know that? Have you seen what lies beyond the physical world to know that there is nothing there? Well, to the contrary, there are positive reasons for rejecting naturalism. Positive reasons for rejecting naturalism, which is EAAN, the acronym, there's really no justification for presuming that naturalism and limiting the possible explanations. Scientism is self-refuting. Science is the only test for truth. Well, what about logic and mathematical truths? When you use science, they're presupposed. The truth of ethics, the truth of aesthetics, metaphysical truths such as existence of the external world or the reality of the past. Can science test the statement that science is the only test for truth? If not, the statement is invalid and refutes itself. Naturalism should lead to skepticism, because the evolutionary argument against naturalism is that Darwin himself recognized that this is a problem with his theory. With me, the horrid doubt always arises that whether the convictions of a man's mind, which has been developed from the mind of lower animals, are of any value or at all trustworthy. Would anyone trust in the conviction of a monkey's mind? If there are any convictions in such a mind at all? That's what Charles Darwin said on the subject. René Descartes shares his concern in that we may of course suppose that our existence derives not from a supremely powerful God, but either from ourselves or from something source. But in that case, a less powerful we make the author of coming into being, the more likely it will be that we are imperfect so as to be deceived all the time. C.S. Lewis also echoed this concern in supposing that there was no intelligent design beyond the universe, no creative mind. In that case, nobody designed my brain from the purpose of thinking. It has merely that when the atoms inside my skull happen for the physical or chemical reasons to arrange themselves in a certain way, this gives me, as a byproduct, the sensation that I call thought. But if so, how can we trust my own thinking to be true? It's like upsetting a milk jug and hoping that the way it splashes itself will give you a map of London. But if I can't trust my own thinking, of course, I can't trust the arguments leading to atheism, and therefore have no reason to be an atheist, or anything else. Unless I believe in God, I cannot believe in thought, so I can never use that as a thought to disbelieve in God. Naturalism requires evolution. Evolution uses mutations and natural selection to produce new biological features. Natural selection aims at a survival value, not truth. Belief-forming mechanisms would have been produced by a process that aims for survival value and not just truth. It is likely that many false beliefs would have survived just because you're trying to survive, not because of truth. If evolution and naturalism were both true, there would be no filter to weed out beliefs with natural value that happen to be false. So as long as they aid in the feeding, fighting, and reproducing, natural selection doesn't care. And there's no way to test the reliability of our brains without using our brains. If evolution and naturalism are true, this gives us more reason to doubt the reliability of our own brains. If we have reason to doubt the reliability of our brains, therefore, we have reason to doubt the reliability of any belief that is produced by our brains, including the belief that evolution and naturalism are both true. Therefore, if evolution and naturalism are both true, we have reason to doubt that evolution and naturalism are both true.